My name is Liza Maria, and today on my show, I'm really excited to have as a guest NASA astronaut Dorothy Metcalf. She flew in space with Space Shuttle, being part of the mission STS-131, and before she joined NASA, she taught high school science. So, hello, Dorothy. How are you?
I'm great, Eliza. Thanks so much for asking.
So, my first question for this podcast is, how did you decide to become an astronaut as someone that used to teach science?
Yes, well, actually, teaching wasn't my first plan. In my background, when I was a little girl, I started thinking about like being able to fly in space. Of course, when Sally Ride became the first American woman to fly in space, and I was a third grader, and so I actually made that paper mache astronaut back there of me as an astronaut when my teacher asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Because it felt possible that now little girls could grow up to become an astronaut. But I went to a camp. I went specifically to the U.S. Space and Rocket Camp in Huntsville, Alabama, when I was 15. And at that camp, I learned all about the Hubble Space Telescope, in addition to getting to pretend to be an astronaut and also be on mission control. And so from there, I started planning in high school the classes I wanted to take, and then also in college, that's when I studied specifically geology. And I was planning after I graduated from college to take a gap and be a part of the Peace Corps, and then come back from that gap and go to graduate school in geology. And I figured that I would work at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which does all the planetary exploration with other NASA agencies as well, but does a lot of the robotic pieces. So I thought maybe I would work there and then apply to be an astronaut. So the reason I became a teacher, though, is because my Space Corps program fell through at the last minute. There was some disruptions in the country I was assigned to, and so I wasn't able to go. So the quickest program I could get into, because I couldn't easily apply to grad school at that point, it was September, was to apply to be a teacher. And so I jumped into a program back in Washington State, and I became a high school science teacher. And I did that for a few years, and I started actually looking at graduate schools because I still wanted to keep my big dream. I was teaching my students about the dream. But actually, what happened is that while I was teaching an astronomy class, a student asked about, how do you go to the bathroom in space? And this is a very common question, but I didn't know that. It's a common question for astronauts, especially from school children. But I looked it up, and of course, NASA has a web page dedicated to how to use now the space station toilet. At the time, it was the space shuttle toilet. And I found out the answer for that student, but also on that same page, they were letting teachers know that they were hiring teachers as part of the class of 2004. So that is actually how I went from being a science teacher to applying to become an astronaut.
That's so cool. And right now, talking about teaching for a bit, do you think teaching helped you become an astronaut, like in your background?
Well, teachers and anyone that works in education understands what they know and what they don't know. And I think realizing there's a lot of things we just don't know and being very honest with yourself. So when I came into the astronaut corps, we had a lot to learn. So I knew I didn't know a lot. And that meant I also needed to study really hard when I was getting the information about the systems of the space shuttle and the systems of the space station. I didn't understand the language of flying, so I worked really hard at that. So I think being able to know what you don't know is very important. And then also being able to break things down and make them simple. That's what teachers do all the time. They take the complex and they make it simpler for their students, and then bring their students up to the level of complexity that they're ready to work at. And so I had to do that for myself as well, like take these really big complex things, ask more questions from the trainers. That we had lots of documentation that we could go into, so I could go look up more information and then really help myself fill in the gaps where I was missing, so that I could do we astronauts take written tests, but more importantly, we do performance tests so that I could do well at those performance tests.
And right now, let's slide a bit into this space world. So, about your space mission, because you flew STS-131. So, one of my questions is, what kind of work did you do with the robotic arm during your mission? Can you talk more about
Oh,
it?
sure. I had different types of jobs, of course, like I was part of the flight team on the flight deck. But yes, as soon as flight day one happened, I was part of the robotic arm team for the specific space shuttle arm. And so I grappled the extension that was added as a safety measure after we lost the vehicle Columbia. And this extension has a camera package on the end of it that takes not only pictures in the visible spectrum, but also it uses LiDAR, and so that we could send these images back to the engineers on Earth. So I grappled that extension, and then a team of us rotated through 5 hours of checking out all the tiles of the bottom of the space shuttle, as well as the reinforced carbon-carbon on the wing leading edge. And so this is part of a checkout that all of the missions did after the loss of the Columbia vehicle.
Yeah, and one of the questions I think lots of people have um, is, what was your daily routine like on the ISS? Is it different from the one on Earth?
Well, it's definitely different from the one on Earth. First of all, a lot of times students ask, like, how do we set time? Because we go around the Earth every 90 minutes, but obviously we don't want to have 45 minutes of our daytime and then 45 minutes of sleep. So the way we set our time is on Greenwich time or Universal time. And that's a nice compromise between having a mission control center in Houston and a mission control center just outside of Moscow. Um, so we set our day with that, and then the morning kind of has a routine. Each of us had different tasks. We also want to rotate through the bathroom and get ready, and then we need to eat some breakfast before we start our work. But there's no really like perfect day that just keeps replicating, because we were a shuttle mission docked to the space station. So we had a lot of work, and we also had 3 spacewalks, and each of those days is different. The days that we were just carrying lots of cargo and equipment across the hatch or trash back into the vehicle, those days were a little bit more flexible. But the days that we were doing spacewalks, I was really busy, because even though I didn't go outside the hatch, I was the person talking to our spacewalkers the entire time. So I would get up and make sure that I helped out the folks suiting up our spacewalkers. And then my job was to talk to them and make sure they had all their equipment, because that equipment is what they need outside the hatch, and keep them safe. And so those days were extremely busy. And I remember just like lining up drink bags and snacks along the panel that I was working at, so I could just quickly eat or drink while they were working outside, because it was just really busy time for me. So there's not a routine necessarily for space shuttle astronauts, because we're there for such a short period of time. There's a little bit more routine for ISS astronauts, but even still, I think the beauty of the job is that it has a lot of variety, and variety is definitely the spice of life for astronauts.
Yeah, and how is the food on the ISS? Is it like good?
Well, I always tease that no one goes to space just for the food, right? But the food is not bad. The dietitians really work to make sure that we get food that we'll eat because it's very important. We don't get a hungry sensation in space, so it's important that we keep eating and keep ourselves having high energy and the right types of foods. Again, a lot of our foods are rehydrated and they're preserved, of course, with some salts. Salts are not great for our body. They can contribute to the bone loss that we have, or so we have tried to fly foods that are lower in sodium and also still provide the nutrition that we need. So I feel like our team that works to make us healthy in space has tried to do a good job of providing variety and also providing flavor that comes through maybe in hot sauces or garlic paste, different ways of flavoring our food besides just salt.
That's really cool. And a question I have for so long, and I wanted to ask an astronaut is, did you ever felt more connected to the people around the world while you were looking out of the cupola?
Well, definitely, because as you're looking down at Earth, there are times when you can easily recognize where you're flying over, but other times you don't recognize it. Or maybe at night, it's a little bit tougher to recognize. So we have a computer program that is a little bit like Google Maps or some sort of map function, but it helps us see where we are in our orbit and what part of the world. And this starts to make you feel very connected to the people back there on Earth because then you start to look for those countries again on other orbits. They're not going to be right under you like they were during that orbit, but they will be still in the proximity. And sometimes it's pretty cool to pick out like there's different lights that people use and lighting systems or lack of lights, which is kind of cool too to know that there's true darkness. And I think also it just reminds you as you're looking down that we are all uh, trying to make sure that we have the things we need for life, which of course are food and fresh water. And when you look down, some places you can tell where that is a stressor, where there's not a lot of fresh water in desert areas, or there's not a lot of vegetation. And so food would be a stressor there. And I think that also helps you remember why, as an astronaut, you care so much about Earth. So I definitely felt very connected back to Earth and really curious about like what was happening underneath me.
That's so beautiful. And now let's get back a bit to your first space mission. So if you could like redo one of your a part of your flight, what would it be and why?
Well, I would have liked to gone out and done a spacewalk because I was the backup, so I trained a lot of that work. But I'm also very thankful that my crewmates did not get injured because that's why you have a backup is usually like an injury or a sickness. So I wouldn't have ever wanted that to happen. But I thought it would have been awesome to do a spacewalk and just truly experience being outside the vehicle. But still, pretty much everything else I would keep the same. I felt like we did a really good job, and I loved that part of the work. That's one of my favorite things about my mission is just that we had worked hard for a year and a half in training and got to know each other very well, and then we executed the mission. And no, it didn't go off perfectly, but most space flights don't go off perfectly, but we all worked with our team and then with the ground team to really execute a good mission. So that was just so rewarding to me.
Yeah, and what is one thing you wished every student would know about space?
Oh, that's such a great question. Well, I think that more and more space is for them, right? Like even if you never travel to space, in your daily life, you use equipment, you use information and data that comes from space, and understanding how in your smartphone, there's so much technology that you rely on that has satellite, that uses processing that came from the early Apollo days, materials that were designed out of material research that came from space research. Your human body, the health of your body is understood better because of space. So we use so much in our daily life from human spaceflight and research, but I also want them to know, because there's more commercial companies, there's more satellite companies, that space really truly is for them. And who knows what we will be doing even 5 years from now. So if they can feel that immediacy and they can understand that they are using space data and they might very well be contributing to what we do in space, I think that's pretty exciting.
That's great. And as a final question for this podcast, what's the most important lesson you want kids or students to remember?
It goes back to what you were asking about. Do we feel connected to Earth and to the people of the world? And I think to me, as a person that got this great opportunity to go off our planet and look back at planet Earth and just truly realize, like, it's our Earth. It's not my Earth or my country's Earth. It's our Earth. And the things that we do impact each other. So I try to really operate at that type of level, about thinking about how my actions really do matter to someone else in a different place and location. So I hope that we all think that way. And that is a hard thing, as we have loyalties to countries or different things like that. I hope that we can actually think more globally and continue to act locally and act with our actions matter.
That's an amazing lesson. So thank you so much for coming on my podcast. And it was amazing and out of this world talking with you.
Thanks, Eliza. These were great questions, and I hope that the your friends and new friends watch and learn some more.